Welcome to episode 17 of the Dynasty Dreamerz podcast. We are your hosts, Joe Galloway and Luigi Federico.
Hey everybody, long time no see.
Collectively, we are the Dynasty Dreamerz. We wake up thinking about Dynasty. We go to bed thinking about Dynasty. We dream about Dynasty. You get the picture. Well, Luigi, it's been quite a while since we did an episode back right before the start of the season. We did a Sport Scoring season preview. And, just to let everyone know, we're just got busy. And the amount of time it took to record the podcast and edit the podcast and do all that just got to be a little bit too much. And we didn't really feel like that we could carry it through the point scoring season. So that's why we haven't been around. It's not because we don't enjoy what we're doing here. You got anything to add on that?
No, I mean, we were able to get together on Sundays a lot before the season started, and during the season we wanted to be watching football instead of recording football, so that took away a day that we were able to be recording and editing and all that. So I just felt like putting that to the side, putting the recording to the side, and actually enjoying the football season was more important.
Yeah, I would agree. So, moving on to what we can expect going forward. There's not really a really good answer here. The reason why we're here today is because we just kind of missed doing this part of the show, getting together, talking about Dynasty football. I mean, we do it all the time on the phone. We do it all the time through texting and group chatting. But there's just, in my opinion, Luigi, was just something nice about doing this once a week, once every 2 weeks, once a month, whenever we could do it. Last year, getting together and talking about Dynasty football. I feel like in society in general, there's a whole lot of texting and, everybody communicates through social media. And for me, it's nice just to get together with somebody every once in a while and just shoot the shit about what's going on in the world of Dynasty football.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's always nice to be able to, really honestly, to have one or two other perspectives instead of like we talk a lot in group chats and there's always different perspectives and there's always people trolling, and I just feel like getting together and discussing our own personal opinions in this type of environment, just there's something that feels a little bit better about it.
Yeah, and I'm going to put a massive disclaimer on the show going forward. Number one, Luigi and I don't know how often we're going to do this. It's just going to be kind of a when we have time to. It might be once a week, might be once every 2 weeks, might be once a month. You might not hear from us again until next January. Who knows?
I hope that's not the case, but
right.
You never know.
Right. But we all are also going to do something a little different than we did last year. And it's because one of the things last year that kind of got me and Luigi both down is neither one of us enjoyed the editing process of creating the show. We enjoyed the recording part of it and getting to talk to each other about Dynasty football and the other people who were on the show as well. We enjoyed that quite a bit, but we hated the editing part with a passion. And we realized that is important to make a good,
high quality
podcast. Mm-hmm. But going forward, we're going to be doing all of our podcasts in one take. There will be no editing, so hopefully we don't get anything too terribly off. The quality might not be the greatest, and honestly, if people don't want to listen because of that, I completely understand. We both completely understand, but this is just kind of where we're at right now. We don't enjoy the editing process, but we love getting together and doing this part of it. And, if people are turned off by that, I completely understand. I might be as well, honestly. I might not. If the podcasts I listen to, if they did them in one take with no editing, I might stop listening too. I don't know.
I mean, there are some podcasts that do them live, and
right.
you watch the videos, and it's not like they edit those. But we're obviously a little bit newer than that. So in previous podcast episodes, we've recorded in certain takes. We've recorded, 20 total sections, and then we had to go edit them and splice them together and listen to them just to make sure that everything was good enough quality. And honestly, that took 3 to 4 to 5 additional hours from recording.
Yeah.
And with both of our work lives and both of our personal lives, it just interfered too much with the enjoyment of wanting to do the podcast.
Yeah. And you know, to sum everything up, if people want to, anyone out there that continues to listen to us, listens to this show or listen to any going forward, we greatly appreciate it. If this isn't for you and you don't want to listen anymore because of the way we're doing the podcast, I completely understand. But if you do enjoy it, you know, let us know. So we're going to get right into it. Let's start off, Luigi, just a little recap, yeah, of how our fantasy football seasons went, and I'll go ahead and let you start.
You know, I go into seasons pretty much thinking what I'm going to do with teams, and we discussed this in other videos or episodes. What would you do with this team? And I honestly do that with most of my teams to start. Sometimes you think to yourself, oh, this is a competitor, and then 3 weeks in, you're blown out by season-ending injuries, and you're just like, well, now I have to sell some of these assets, or else, you know, they age an additional year, and you lose more value in them. So going into the year, I thought I had 10 to 12 total competitive teams that I really thought could make a splash. And of those 10 to 12 teams, I think I probably made the playoffs in 8 of them. So I was pretty satisfied overall. And then there were a couple of surprises. You know, you always have a couple of players that you didn't expect to go off. I'm going to say Kyron Williams, for instance, as just coming out of nowhere, somebody you got really cheap in startup drafts or in rookie drafts a couple years ago, that just help your team be over the top and make the playoffs. So I think I had 2 or 3 of those as well. And in full discrepancy, I don't know if I have ever said this on the show, I probably had about 45 total leagues at the beginning of 2023. So I probably made the playoffs in a total of 10 of those. So that isn't great numbers, but when you go into the season in probably 20 of them, anticipating to yourself, there's just no chance I'm going to make the playoffs. I'm going to try my best to sell all of these assets. I really, in my mind, made the playoffs probably in 10 of 20 total leagues that I anticipated having a chance to make the playoffs, and I feel like those numbers are pretty good. Yeah. I think I ended up with 3 championships total.
Well, I hate to bring the doom and gloom to the show, but you know, I think this is an important conversation to have because maybe some other people felt this way, or maybe you felt this way in years past, or maybe you'll feel this way down the road. I ended the 2023 Dynasty season very disappointed, very discouraged, and honest to goodness, didn't really know if I wanted to. I'm not going to say come back. I was always going to keep some number of teams, but there was a point whenever I thought about majorly downsizing my amount of teams. And the reason why is I expected this to be my best Dynasty year so far. You know, we started in 2018, as we said, you know, last year. So we've been doing this for, 6 years now? This was our 6th year. I expected this season to be my best, most profitable year at the beginning of the season. I just looking at my rosters, looking at where I'd come with them, I just thought it was going to be a really banner year for Team Joe Galloway in Dynasty football. And the regular season played out that way. I have 20 teams. 10 of them made the playoffs. I projected about 8 teams to make before the season. I know you mentioned that, 8 of the 20. So you say, well, why do you expect to have such a good year? You only had 8 of 20 that you expected to be win now teams. But those 8, like 6 of them were juggernauts. Legitimately, I thought were probably the best teams in the league. So that's why I expected to have a good year financially. So I ended up making a couple of teams I wasn't expecting made the playoffs, and then all the ones I expected. So going to the playoffs, I was on cloud 9. 5 first-round buys. I've never had a 25% first-round buy share. To me, that feels really high. Four first in the leagues in scoring. So 20% of my leagues, I was literally the top scoring team in the league. And then the playoffs came around. And going with high hopes, and we've all been there. So by no stretch of the imagination is this a Joe Galloway only problem. This juggernaut of a dynasty football season I thought I was about to have went way off the rails. I had only 3 of 10 playoff teams make the finals. That's with 5 first-round byes, keep in mind. And I had only one of those 3 teams that made the finals win a championship. So 1 championship out of 20 teams. Needless to say, I did not make a profit this year. It was only the second time in 6 seasons in Dynasty that I did not make a profit. And it was frustrating to me because I really felt like this was going to be the season where I did make some hay, so to speak, because all these teams were in such a good place, in my opinion, and the regular season played out. So it brings me to, I guess, what I want to discuss briefly is, and I know a lot of people have been through this, we absolutely have to take this with this dynasty football with a grain of salt, because anything can happen in the playoffs. Your teams can be massively good, and then you just lose. It's very random. I feel like that you have to really look at your success, not based on how much money you won, but what position you were in when it came for playoff time. If you put yourself into position to do well, then you have to consider that a success. And it's taken me a long time to get there. Last year, whenever we started this show, we started on January 20th. That was basically 2 weeks earlier than we're getting on now. And last year, we were discussing what to do with rosters in the offseason. That was the first episode. We looked at one of my rosters, and we were talking about how to handle it going forward. This year, it's February 7th today? I think. February 8th. So we're 3 weeks later almost, and we're just now getting around to talking about how we fared this year, because, and honestly, that's more on me than is Luigi, because I just had a bad taste in my mouth. But I guess the point is that if you're a dynasty diehard, you're going to have to weather some of this and realize that not every year is going to turn out this way.
Yeah, speaking of doing some rosters that we talked about, I think we talked about 2 of my rosters going into last year. Both of those teams finished as the 6th seed and entered the playoffs as the 6th seed. One of them won the 3rd place game. The other one lost in the championship game. But like you said, it truly doesn't matter how good your team is entering the playoffs, because anything can happen. I went into the playoffs and beat the number 1 seed of the playoffs with one of those 6 seeds, just because players just started picking up more towards the end of the year. Like Trey McBride just started being on fire towards the end of the year. And this is a tight end premium league, and it made certain players can just make your team that much better whenever they start turning it on. And honestly, you don't really know when that'll be. It can be early on in the season or in the middle of the season, and you're thinking to yourself, "Oh yeah, I'm blowing these other teams out. I'm gonna be a juggernaut in the playoffs." Right. And then some players just turn cold, or injuries happen that affect other players. So there is always storms that you're gonna have to weather. If you make it through the year without major injuries, you're one of the luckiest people that I've ever met, because every team has major injuries that affects their abilities to win. And it doesn't matter how good you think the rest of your roster is, one player can affect it tremendously.
Well, and it's crazy that you say that, because that was part of my issue this year too, is a lot of those teams that were, obviously whenever you can plan to have a juggernaut all you want to, but you have to have some luck. Even if you've got that roster ready to go week 1, it's great. Tops of the league by far. Injuries can kill you. And I actually did okay in a lot of my leagues this year.
Hey, I don't think you have very many injuries in Suplex.
No, I didn't. Or Who Cares, which I know is a league that you're not in. Or a couple other leagues where I entered with really, really good teams. those teams, for whatever reason, weren't affected by the injury bug. So I was even more on cloud nine, thinking this is my year, and then it wasn't. So it was discouraging, but at the end of the day, you have to look at it, and I don't know if everyone keeps up with this. This is something I keep up with. 4 out of 6 years making a profit isn't bad, right? It's just, this is the year that I thought it was.
It was going to be a major profit.
Yeah, and then ended up losing, and I didn't lose much because, third, fourth place games helped me out a lot. I had 2 second places, so it's not like it was a huge loss. And let me say this too: we don't play fantasy football for the getting rich money aspect of it. I could care less about prize money. If every single person in my leagues would play to their 100% capability, I would do it for free. I don't care. To me, the money keeps people honest. It keeps people from not setting their lineup and from not paying attention during key parts of the year whenever they should be paying attention.
Or not making trades when, they've got a super aging asset on their team that they're not going to be competing over the next 3 years.
Right. So the reason why the money does matter to me is because I want to be able to play more leagues next year. I want to be able to keep all the leagues that I had from the year before. And if you lose a lot of money, it's hard to do those things. So any time that I worry about money in fantasy football, specifically Dynasty, it's just about being able to feed my addiction more. It's not about making a bunch of money and getting rich, because we all know you can't do that playing Dynasty football. That's an improbability.
I don't necessarily think I lost a ton of money. I probably, if I lost money, it's only by, a little bit, like you said.
You mean this year?
This year, yeah. But fantasy football was pretty hard for me this year because of how many leagues I had, and I already have seriously reduced my number from 45 down to, I'm probably down to 25 teams right now. And it's not even because, I know all of the, I don't want to say I know every single player on my roster, but I knew when a player got hurt or was listed as out right before a game, I knew pretty much what rosters I had that had that player on it. So it's not that I was affected by that a lot. But I will be honest, there was some times where I didn't remember having that particular player on a team, and I ended up losing because of it. Yeah. And that made me realize that I'm in way too many leagues that I have to mentally search for what player I have, what roster I have this particular player on. So like I said, I could do it if I had more time, because now I'm working on Sundays now, so it's a lot harder for me to be paying attention to my rosters. So it was a lot more difficult this year than in years past. The losing money, or even a little bit of money, did deter me from returning to certain leagues. Yeah. And I hate leaving rosters that I feel like are bad. Yeah. Because I feel like that's a disservice to the rest of the league. So honestly, there are a few bad rosters that I kept, even though I really wanted to get rid of them. And I got rid of some teams that I thought I had been making good headway on, just because I hate leaving leagues, like I just said, that have bad rosters. I hate when I'm a commissioner of a league and a team leaves my league with horrible roster, because now I either have to cut the entry fee in half, or I have to pay partial of the entry fee.
Which we're going to have to do an invitation.
Yeah, we will. Yeah. So it's really hard on commissioners, and being a commissioner in a lot of leagues, I feel for them. So I left some really good rosters, and I even had some commissioners reach out and say, this is a good team, I'm not going to have any trouble filling it. Yeah. So I don't want people to think that I only left bad rosters, because I did cut, I would say, 20 total teams out of my repertoire.
Well, I've got a lot fewer than you. Like I said, I only have the 20, but I think that, and I waited. I knew right after the playoffs ended, I knew I wasn't in the right headspace to be making any decisions. Mm-hmm. So I think I'm going to keep all 20 in mind. I don't see a reason to leave any of them. I leave very few leagues anyways. Mm-hmm. That's just kind of I don't like doing it for all the reasons you just said. I'm not going to go into it. I don't like leaving leagues. I do it rarely, so I think I'm going to play in all 20 of mine next year. Where the money part comes in is I really wanted to pick up 4, 5, 6 new leagues this year, but because I had a loss last year, I'm probably only going to do 2 or 3. Mm-hmm. So that's where the money affected me this year. Once all the dust settled, and once I got my head clear of what actually happened, and convinced myself that it was just bad luck and things will they will turn around. I will have teams that win the championship down the road that probably shouldn't have won the championship, just like the teams that lost this year that should have. So, let's move on from this. I think we've said enough about it. Let's get into a little bit of the player aspect of this past season and just go through a few things that we saw this year. And we'll do it under the guise of, let's start with this one. Luigi, who is a player this year that whenever the season started, you were way down on them or you were way up on them, and they did not produce in the manner that you expected? Let's just call this, who's the guy that you were most wrong about, or a guy you were wrong about in 2023?
Well, I mean, obviously there's always going to be guys that you go into a season high on or low on that underproduce or overproduce, respectively. And one guy that particularly comes to mind for me is Rachaad White. He finished as RB6 overall and RB9 in points per game. I didn't have him anywhere near that high. I probably would have said he needs to be drafted 10 to 12 spots lower than that. And I even said in certain group chats that I felt like other players who were going for cheaper than him in auction drafts or lower than him in startup drafts needed to be drafted higher or paid more for than Rachaad White, because I just didn't see a world where Baker Mayfield produced a great running back. And while he may not be great, RB9 in points per game is still a lot better than what I anticipated. So that's the guy for me.
RB6 overall, right?
RB6 overall, RB9 in points per game. I tend to look at points per game more. I don't know why.
Yeah, I do during the season, but I feel like once the dust settles, it's more of a cumulative for me. But I do pay attention to points.
So I mean, RB6 overall. I mean, that's tremendous. That's a lot higher.
RB6 and RB9 in average is pretty much the same.
Right. Yeah. I mean, they're only about a point per game.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, I don't want to take anything away from that Tampa Bay offense. I mean, it was a lot better than what I thought it was going to be, and that did definitely help Rachaad White. Somebody told me before the season that they thought Rachaad White would get a lot of dump-off passes. A friend of the show, actually, Tyler, and turns out he was right. I mean, our RB6 is a lot better than what I thought it was going to be. So that's the guy for me.
Where do we see his value going forward? Because I know some of the early, I haven't been paying much attention until this week. Honestly, I took a much needed break this year from Dynasty football until basically, like I said, the beginning of the week.
Yeah.
Some of the ADP I'm seeing, he's going in like the 5th round of startups is where he's being projected to go. He's RB10-ish on some sites. Is that sustainable? Is there any reason to believe that he can't be in that area? Or
look, I think Baker Mayfield earned himself a contract in Tampa. They've still got Chris Godwin there, and who knows? They may also re-sign Mike Evans. And if you re-sign Mike Evans, you've got Chris Godwin, you've got Baker Mayfield who's slinging the football. I don't see any reason why Rachaad White can't finish as a top 10 RB.
If they lose at Mike Evans, does that mean they sling it to him? They throw short passes to Rachaad White even more? That's
maybe, but I think if you lose Mike Evans, the coverage can be different. Like with Mike Evans, you have to worry about him going over the top. You have to. So you have to have that safety playing over the top.
Yeah. Agreed.
With Mike Evans not there, you may not necessarily have to worry about that. That safety can play up a lot more. So some of the bigger runs or the bigger receptions that Rachaad White was able to get this year may not be there next year. Now, I'm not taking anything away from him. I did that once before, and I look like a fool now. So I'm not saying it's not possible, but I wouldn't draft him at RB10 unless Mike Evans is re-signed.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that, and I'm not sure I'd draft him at RB10 anyways. Just guys that are kind of under him right now, in most people's opinion. Saquon Barkley might be under Rachaad White. Josh Jacobs and maybe not under him, but in that same value range. These are guys to me that have done it for multiple seasons.
Yeah.
And I'm still going to trust guys like that over guys like Rachaad White. That's just me personally. But we'll discuss that more down the road maybe.
Yeah.
So on to the player that I was most strong about, or one of the players I was most strong about. Kenny Pickett, the quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, I didn't expect Kenny Pickett to be QB1 or, QB5 or even
a QB1.
Yeah, or even a QB1. I did think with being in the second year of his offense and having a healthy Deontay Johnson and having a new toy to play with in George Pickens and what I hoped would be an improved run game, it couldn't be any worse than it was the year before, right? With Najee and Jalen Warren, and thinking that maybe their offensive line had gotten a little bit better, I thought Kenny Pickett had a chance to be a borderline QB1 or maybe a middle-of-the-pack QB2, which is just fine for where you were drafting him in last year's startup drafts. And also just fine if you're spending – Kenny Pickett was going on average, I think, around 105 or 106 in his rookie draft, maybe a little later than that. That is absolutely fine for
a year two guy.
Yeah, a year two guy. So mid-QB2. But boy, was I wrong. Kenny Pickett finished as the QB 31 in scoring. He's currently being valued somewhere around the 25 to 30 range in terms of value. And he's projected right now to be somewhere in the 9th or 10th round of a startup. And to be quite honest with you, with the shares that I already have invested in him, I'm not sure I would take the gamble even in round 9 or 10. If the question is where did things go off the rail, well, maybe Kenny Pickett's just not that good. That's certainly a possibility. Certainly looked like that at times. I do think there is a Matt Canada effect. So maybe there's some room for improvement for Kenny Pickett. The one thing I know for sure is that with what I have invested in him, I probably will have to just wait it out on Kenny Pickett. What are your thoughts?
Well, I have never been a Kenny Pickett guy.
Right.
I don't know if it's just I saw some of those bad attributes in college, or if I just didn't think that offensive line was very good. It could be both. Because that offensive line, and I don't know if I've said this on the show, but I have said I didn't think that offensive line was very good. However, I don't think it can be worse.
Yeah.
I do.
It can't, right?
I do think...
If he's on the field, he's going to outscore you.
Yes.
Yeah, right.
So
right.
I think if you had any belief in Kenny Pickett before, this is the time to buy him. Because I do think that he's going to be the starter there next year, at least for the first few games.
Yeah.
And I think Matt Canada is dog poop.
Yeah.
So I think any offensive coordinator that they get is going to be an improvement. I think I would hope that they would add to that offensive line, whether the draft or in free agency. And it's not like those weapons are going anywhere. He has all those weapons still. I think now is the time to buy Kenny Pickett if you had faith in him before. Don't sell him for cheap. Keep this guy.
Well, I think that's how I'm going to approach not...
selling him?
Sorry, mixed up my words a little bit. That's how I'm going to approach this. Mm-hmm. I have, I think, 4 shares of Kenny Pickett, which is a 20% share stake. I believe 20% is a high share stake. I think basically anything 15% or higher to me is what I consider a high investment in a player. Some people would say it's higher. To me, 15% is controlling a lot of your fantasy well-being, in my opinion. So I have a 20% share stake. The way I'm going to keep my faith in Kenny Pickett is by not selling the shares I have dirt cheap. I'm not going to go out and try to acquire new shares of Kenny Pickett unless somebody's basically willing to give him to me.
Well, so, and I just said I've never had faith in Kenny Pickett.
Right.
If somebody is offering me Kenny Pickett for a late second, I'm going to take it. I don't care.
You're going to take Pickett. Right.
Yeah.
And so would I.
Yeah.
But he's probably being valued somewhere along the lines of an early to mid-second, if I had to guess. And that's dicey.
I got him in a league for essentially a mid-second. And this is like a 16-team league.
Yeah.
So...
Well, in a 16-team league, that's a little... Yeah.
So
and even a 14-team. And a 12-team, a mid-second is a little dicey, in my opinion.
Yeah.
It is. So... Yeah, terrible loss of value there. It's a good thing that he wasn't 101 or 102 range as a rookie, because I probably would have bought in. There was one league where I did buy him at the 102 because I needed a quarterback badly, and you know how I feel about quarterbacks. And I did spend the 102 on him one league. So that's a terrible, terrible loss in that draft class.
That's okay. There are people in this room that spent 102 on Trey Lance. So.
Okay. Well, that's
if that makes you feel any better, Joe.
That's not me, so it must be you. So yeah, and I think what I learned from Kenny Pickett is, and probably something that I hadn't really learned before, if a quarterback is not taken in the top, I'm going to say 5 to 7 range, if he's not in the NFL draft, if he's not taken in that top 5 to 7, maybe top 10, whatever, even if it's a first round, if he slips into those late teens or 20, you might want to consider that he's not maybe as good as you think he is.
And obviously there are exceptions.
There are.
Lamar,
Absolutely. Jalen
Hurts, just 2 off the top of my head.
Absolutely.
32 and in the second round. There are exceptions. But like you said, if you look at the quarterbacks that are in the league, your man crush, Jordan Love, was 28 or whatever. But he was in the league for 3 years before he even got on the football field.
Right. And your investment in Jordan Love was nothing.
Because he was going so much later in rookie drafts than looking back he probably should have. Or I don't know. When a guy finally starts his first game in four years.
Right.
But like you said, especially now, you've got guys who have gone at 15 to some of our favorite teams in this league and are not very good. But you look at fantasy production, most of the guys that are elite in the league are guys that have gone in the top 8. Tua, Herbert, Burrow. Mahomes is just outside that top 8, but Mahomes is Mahomes. The top 10 fantasy scoring quarterbacks, most of them are all top 10 picks. So I think a lot of that has to do with investment from the NFL teams, but also I think that's just the threshold, truly, of quarterbacks that make it a long time in the NFL. And that's where, the best ability is availability. So I would rather have a guy who scores 12 points per game for 15 years than a guy who scores 15 points per game for 6 years. You know what I mean?
Well, maybe not 12 points per game at the quarterback position.
Right.
Yes,
I know what I mean.
Well, I think we've tortured ourselves enough with how wrong we were about certain players this year. Let's take our victory lap. So, Luigi, who is the player that you are most impressed about getting right for the 2023 season?
Well, I'm not most impressed about it because I was insisting it the entire offseason.
Still.
Insisting. Josh Allen is the Dynasty quarterback.
Oh, wow. I didn't think you were going to go this high up on
That's
this.
my man right there.
Is this like a shot at me?
This is a shot at you, Joe. And now some of you listening may be thinking, oh, Josh Allen still isn't the Dynasty quarterback 1. The consensus is now Josh Allen is the Dynasty quarterback 1.
Yeah.
And you know, at the end of 2024, it may not be right. But for now, I'm taking this victory lap.
Yeah.
I've said for the last 2 years that I think Josh Allen, in terms of fantasy, is the QB1.
Go ahead. Luigi and I went back and forth on this for several episodes last year. You know, whenever it would come up that Josh Allen, he would say Josh Allen's the QB1. I'd say it's definitely Patrick Mahomes. And I will say, on this date, February, whatever it is, 8th, 2024, Josh Allen is the QB1.
I hear bells ringing. I just want to let you guys know that.
Like Luigi said, I'm not sure, and if whenever we're sitting here this time next year, if I'll be saying the same thing. But for right now, the crown's his. I will be taking Josh Allen if I have the 101 in any startups this year. I'm not going to tell you that I feel great about it, but I think you have to do it. I think he's earned it. And this was a lot of my, not criticism of Josh Allen, but a lot of the reason why I kept him from QB1 last year, aside from Mahomes just being the most consistent player in Dynasty, which maybe that's not the case anymore, but we definitely felt that way last year. Josh Allen, to me, seems like the kind of guy that's not going to last more than a few more years because of the toll that the hits take on his body. I'm not sure that I've changed my mind on that.
He looked better this year.
He did. But despite him looking a little better in that regards, I'm not sure that I've changed my mind from that aspect. But what I have determined is that maybe he scores enough points the next 4 to 5 years that it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
That you don't need to look that far down the road because this guy just might win you 2 championships by himself.
Right. And I'm going to kind of turn the ship a little bit. I think it's highly possible that we're looking at Patrick Mahomes next year, easily the QB1, and we're a fool for even saying it's Josh Allen. The reason I say that is because Rashee Rice looked really good this year. For a rookie, he looked pretty good, right?
Right. I've got a little man crush right now on Rashee Rice. That's for sure.
And one of the main reasons why I was so down on Patrick Mahomes this year, and even going forward, is because they didn't look to be providing him with weapons.
Yeah.
I think Rashee Rice can turn out to be a weapon.
Yeah. I think he's a weapon right now.
Right.
I think we'll see that this Sunday.
Yes.
You know.
Unfortunately.
He's basically been a weapon for the last 7 or 8 weeks of the regular season.
Yeah, at least.
Sky's the limit for Rashee Rice. Love him. We'll talk about him more later. I don't want to get too far off topic.
But I'm just going to go a little bit further.
Yeah.
And I do...
Sorry.
No, you're fine. I do think that it is highly possible because there are a lot of wide receivers in this draft. And I think Patrick Mahomes showed that he kind of needs at least somebody who can get open. And it wasn't Rashee Rice early on in the year. And that's why Patrick Mahomes finished as the QB9 or something like that. Because he didn't have the weapons to get open. And I think it kind of scared Andy Reid a little bit. And I don't see any reason why they don't go get him another weapon.
Well, he has to be the Chiefs have to be the leader in the clubhouse right now for Mike Evans' services, right?
Mike Evans or...
Pittman.
Or
Higgins.
Yeah, I mean...
They're going to get somebody, I would say.
I agree with that 100%. And the moment that one of those guys signs in Kansas City...
He might be the QB1.
He might go back to being the QB1. Because, I mean, those guys they're elite. And even if he goes out and... Even if the Chiefs go out and get a Brian Thomas or a Keon Coleman in the draft...
Yeah.
I mean... That's just another weapon, in my opinion. I think those two guys are going to be great wide receivers with Patrick Mahomes. So, while I am taking my victory lap now, and I'm going to be taking it all until the start of the 2024 season, who knows, really, is all I'm trying to say.
So, the player that I am the most impressed with myself this year, the player that I got my victory lap, and I think this comes as no surprise to Luigi.
I already know.
He alluded to it earlier. It's Jordan Love.
He loves his love.
And the reason why I'm proud of this one is because I was on this from the get-go.
He was. I was not.
I bought tons of shares of Jordan Love when he was a rookie, whenever you could get him in the late second, early third. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't take a lot of belief to spend late second or third. I know that.
Even a mid-second, I think you just need a little belief to take a guy there.
Right. Mm-hmm. But where I think the real belief really came in for me is I never sold those shares. Mm-hmm. I saw it every year. Aaron Rodgers for 3 years, Aaron Rodgers sticks around. Jordan Love is pushed to the back burner. And in my mind, I said to myself, just be patient. And I think that is something that we don't do enough in Dynasty football. We tend to think that whatever happens in the first 3 weeks of a guy's career is what is going to be going forward. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the reason why I'm sitting here today with so many Jordan Love shares. It's the reason why I'd second round picks. And let's be honest, you could spend a late second 4 years from now, and if it turns into a guy that finished as the QB6 in scoring this year, and right now he's somewhere between QB 10 and 15 in value, that's a late second, early third at quarterback in a startup. That's a late second, early third draft pick. So that's an incredible increase in value. Mm-hmm. And you can wait 3 or 4 years for that. That roster spot is not that harmful to you.
It's a late second, early third, even if you had to spend a mid-second on him. I mean, you could sell him right now for a couple of firsts if you wanted to.
Right. And oh yeah, easily.
Yeah.
And I've done this a lot with quarterbacks in the past with the Mason Rudolphs and this guy and
Kenny Pickett.
Pickett was more expensive. I'm talking about guys who were
later
really cheap.
Yeah.
Taking these quarterbacks and saying, I'm going to be patient and see what happens. I did eventually give up on Rudolph, but I think that's fair.
Right. Jalen Hurts, there's another one.
Jalen Hurts is
mid-seconds.
Yeah.
Where you were spending on that.
Right. And if you just hold on to those guys, and granted, most of them pay off sooner than Jordan Love did.
Mm-hmm. Most of them don't work out either.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. But if you spend 4 late seconds on these quarterbacks, and even one of them hits, I mean, it's made up for those 4 late seconds, and 4 or 5 times fold.
Exponentially, yep.
Yeah. So that's the. I've talked about a little bit about the belief in Jordan Love and how I invested in him, and even before this season, he was going like 6th or 7th in startups, and some people were saying, well, Jordan Love's not even worth a late first. I'd take a late first over Jordan Love, and I was very vocal to those people then that I think you're wrong. I could have never predicted this, I'll be honest with you. I didn't expect him to be QB6. I'd be a liar if I said I did. But I did fully expect Jordan Love to gain an immense amount of value from what he was being valued at in this time in the offseason last year.
And you know me, I felt that Jordan Love wasn't worth, this year, I felt like he wasn't worth the risk.
Yeah.
Just because I can't remember for the life of me players that were being valued around him, but let's just say in some startups or in some auctions, like Jared Goff, for instance, was going around the same price. And I just felt personally I would rather have Jared Goff.
Right.
Because Jared Goff looked okay. And I wasn't sure Jordan Love would.
And I have no problem with that. I had Goff ahead of Love before the start of the season, but people were paying more than a first for Jared Goff. Love was a guy that you could literally get in a lot of leagues. You could still get for a late first, in the offseason. And obviously, he's worth quite a bit more than that now. Let's talk about his future just a little bit. What do you see for him? You know what I see for him. What do you see for him?
I do believe that this was his, I don't want to say ceiling year, because I do think there was a lot of mistakes made early in the year that he may not make next year and may have a better year. But it's hard for me to see him performing better than QB6. I just think that there are more quarterbacks. Burrow got hurt. Herbert got hurt and didn't finish that high. I don't think if you're buying it at QB6 prices, I guess is what I'm trying to say, you're doing it wrong. I think QB 10 is perfectly reasonable.
And that's where he's being valued.
Yeah.
And for the record, I agree with you. Do I think that he could be QB6 again or higher? Yes, I do believe he can be.
Yes.
Do I think it's more realistic that he settles in that 7 to 12 range in scoring? I do.
Mm-hmm.
I do believe that. We've got a nice crop of rookie quarterbacks coming up. We've got Burrow that's going to come back from injury. It's going to be hard for him to maintain that QB6 overall. Absolutely. But I do think that again, I would be taking him in the first round or even the early second round. I do think he's earned that late second, early third round value. And if I'm in that area in a startup draft and I need a quarterback, I won't hesitate to take Jordan Love there. Part of this is there's so many things that impressed me about Jordan Love this year. And he did start shaky. From an NFL standpoint, his fantasy numbers were pretty good all year long, but his completion percentage was in the toilet for the first, 6 to 8 weeks. 6 to 8 weeks of the season. I think it was like 56, 57%. But by the end of the year, he had the last 6 to 8 weeks of the season, his completion percentage, I think, was in the low 70s, enough to where he increased his season average to almost 65%, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
So that's what why I think I'm riding high on Jordan Love, is because he even though he was good in fantasy all year, you saw a steady improvement in him as just a player from week 1 to week 17 or week 18, whatever. And in the playoffs, he had a fantastic game against Dallas. I feel like his game against San Francisco, while it wasn't great, was a little underrated. I don't think it was bad. I don't necessarily think it was good.
Bad.
You think it was bad? I don't think it was bad. I think it was.
It was bad. I don't think it was bad enough to take away everything that he did earlier.
Well, no, absolutely. It's
but
one,
it was
one
bad.
game.
It was bad.
One game. And what else is encouraged? The biggest thing that and I mentioned this in a group chat that we're both part of towards the end of the year, the most encouraging thing to me about Jordan Love is he doesn't seem like he has to have a wide receiver. I think the stat was over the last 5 games maybe of the regular season, he had a different leading wide receiver in all 5 of those games.
Yep.
He just distributes the ball. He can throw it to anyone. I
don't think he has an alpha, but I think he's got 5 wide receiver 2s, and he's got 3 tight end 2s, like a bunch of guys that are good enough that they shouldn't all be on the same team.
And the combination of him and his coach, because I give LaFleur a lot of credit, I think that is enough to make me think he's going to not maintain his scoring baby, but he's going to maintain his 10 to 15 value, in my opinion.
They're all going to be together unless one of them gets traded or cut.
Right.
Like none of them have contracts expiring over the next 4 years. They're all going to be there. So I agree with that statement. I think it's very possible that we can see an improvement in the NFL, but maybe not necessarily in fantasy.
One more thing before we go, one more category here, so to speak. Who was the player that you were most surprised about? And we're going to exclude guys like Kyron Williams and Tank Dell, the obvious answers, right? Who was the guy that you were most surprised by in the 2023 season?
Well, while we aren't going to go with Tank Dell, I am going to say C.J. Stroud. I think C.J. Stroud...
I almost went with him. I just didn't want to go with 3 quarterbacks.
Right. Well,
so
I just can't help it. I just can't help it. He finished as the 17th overall scorer in fantasy. And going into the year, everyone thought that the Texans were going to be the worst team. Looking back at the 2023 draft, when they traded away their first-round pick, I specifically remember all of us going, what the heck are they doing? Because they're going to be so bad next year.
Right.
But no, C.J. Stroud came out.
Yeah. Now, of course, I have to say this. You're going to have people listening and people who aren't listening, plenty of people out there that say they knew it all along.
Sure.
But let's be perfectly honest. None of us knew that C.J. Stroud or the Texans or Tank Dell, none of us knew this was going to happen.
Yeah. C.J. Stroud, whether it be because of coaching, whether it be because Nico Collins and Tank Dell are just them, C.J. Stroud pretty much single-handedly helped that team go from a bottom 3 team last year to a playoff team this year.
Yeah.
I think sky's the limit for that guy. That's one of the guys you were able to get him as, the 103 or 104 last year, just depending on.
Oh, he honestly
105 in some places.
106.
Yeah.
And he was way below Anthony Richardson.
Yeah.
And usually behind Bryce Young. I was one of the people that had Bryce Young ahead of C.J. Stroud. I think more people had, based on my drafts, Bryce Young was ahead of C.J. Stroud.
I tend to flip them because I had so many 104s, 105s. I was able to mix and match my ownership of them.
Right.
If you were to ask me which one, I have one team, I have the 104, Bryce Young and C.J. Stroud were on the board last year, I would have taken Bryce Young.
Right. Well, and Bryce Young was my QB1. C.J. Stroud was my QB2, and Richardson was my 3. I know everybody thinks I was crazy for that, and I think that's eventually going to bear out, if I'm being honest. The 3 part of it.
Yeah.
So I was high on Stroud. Anywhere in that 1 to 6 range last year with all those guys, and honestly, that I value quarterbacks so high. I was taking Stroud at the 104, 105 in some spots whenever Gibbs or JSN were still on the board, just because I thought that gets quarterback, take the value, right?
Yep.
And I believed in the guy. I am not surprised that C.J. Stroud is good. I am surprised that he was this good, this fast, and I'm surprised that the weapons are, because let's be honest, one of the differences, I'm not going to say one of the difference between Bryce Young and C.J. Stroud this year was the supporting cast. And if you don't believe me, there's an interview where C.J. Stroud says the same thing.
Yeah, it's just like a week ago. He said that exact same thing.
You know what I'm talking about?
I know exactly what you're talking about, yeah.
Yeah.
He basically said, get that man some weapons.
Basically, yes. And that's not me saying that I think Bryce Young's going to be better than C.J. Stroud. Mm-hmm. I do think that it's a possibility, but right now, you have to go with C.J. Stroud.
I do just want to make a funny comment. Last year, you, myself, and your son Bryce, we were doing a podcast, and I made the comment that I thought C.J. Stroud's weapons were better. I don't know if you remember that, Joe.
I remember you saying that. I remember thinking you were wrong.
Yes,
but boy, were you right.
Well, and here's the funny thing. I had forgotten that DJ Shark was on the Panthers.
Yeah.
So after the podcast, I even said, "Oh, I'm wrong. Actually, I actually think the Panthers' weapons were better." And looking back, I should have just stuck through it because I would have looked like a genius.
Well, and the thing about that is, obviously, Nico Collins is better than anyone we have. The Panthers have, and so is Tank Dell.
That's what I was about to say.
The real difference was Tank Dell because we took a guy in that draft named Jonathan Mingo. We'll talk about him later on, probably down the road. And they took Tank Dell, I think, a full round later. We took Mingo in the second round. And those two things couldn't have worked out any worse for us and better for them.
Yeah.
And another thing I'll say to close on this, and tell me what you honestly think. Because I feel like that we would have seen. Well, I'll tell you what I think first, and then let you comment. What if C.J. Stroud had have played for the Panthers this year, and Bryce Young had have played for the Texans? First off, I think Bryce Young would have been a lot better than he was with the Panthers. We would have seen the Dell and the Nico effects and the offensive line effects helped Bryce out quite a bit. I think he would have had a very good rookie season. Do I think he would have had a historic rookie season like C.J. Stroud? I do not. But on the flip side, the one thing I do believe is that C.J. Stroud would have looked just as average, bad, whatever you want to say, if he had been behind that horrid offensive line of ours and had those weapons that Bryce Young did. I do believe that we would be saying the same things about C.J. Stroud that we said about Bryce Young this year.
I think Bryce Young wasn't as pro-ready as C.J. Stroud was. So,
that might be fair.
So, I honestly think Stroud would have looked better. Maybe not good enough to where we're saying anything close to what we're saying about him now. Clearly not. That's not what I'm trying to say. But I do think that Stroud looked better overall, and that may have had something to do with the offensive line. If he was getting hit every second the way Bryce Young was, I may be saying something differently. But I just, and honestly, if you remember back to before the draft, I was saying you should take C.J. Stroud.
Well,
and I guess a lot of that has to do with the fact I watched C.J. Stroud almost every week. And I didn't watch Bryce Young, but honestly, I'm a Bama hater as well, so that could have been a part of the reason.
I was a C.J. Stroud guy until the test came out,
right?
And I think the test fooled all of us to a degree,
right? Except for me,
except for you. I think the test fooled a lot of us, and I think going forward, maybe I'm not even going to pay attention to that test anymore. I think that this is a lesson in that. Would I still have taken Bryce if C.J. Stroud had been drafted to the Panthers? Would I have taken him over Bryce Young? Probably, because there's some value in being
in the number one overall pick. Yes,
100%. It means that the NFL chose you, and I know there's a lot of hindsight people out there saying, "Oh, the Texans always wanted the Stroud, and then the Colts wanted Stroud," and there's a lot more evidence out there that everybody was going after Bryce Young than there ever was that people actually wanted C.J. Stroud.
Well, the other thing is the Texans wanted Stroud because they probably knew the Panthers were taking Bryce Young.
Well, remember they tried to trade with the Bears before we did, and it's heavily rumored, and we'll never know.
But that
for
was
sure.
Before the tests too.
Sure. It was heavily rumored though. Even then, it was heavily rumored they were moving up for Bryce Young.
Yeah.
So I believe that the Texans did want Bryce Young, and they settled for C.J. Stroud, and not like they settled for him like they didn't want him, but I do think he was their second choice. That doesn't matter now. We took Young, they got Stroud. And we will talk a lot more about these guys down the road.
Definitely.
Both of them. Because they're hot button issues in the Dynasty community. So before we wrap up, I want to get along to my biggest surprise of the year. And it's not a quarterback, so it's not nearly as sexy as the other five guys we talked about today. But this is a guy who I really thought, I didn't think he would lose a ton of value from where he was last year, because frankly he had come off a couple of just average fantasy seasons because of being paired with Baker Mayfield in Carolina, and who was the guy before Baker Mayfield? Sam Darnold, and then even Teddy Bridgewater before that, right?
Who was your quarterback 2 years ago?
It was Darnold. Yeah, Darnold, Mayfield, and then Young. So,
well, he never had Young. I'm talking about the 2 years.
Yeah, so it was Darnold and then Mayfield were his last two quarterbacks, and then Bridgewater before that. Poor guy. Right, and he still put up good NFL numbers. Yardage he always was up there in yardage. Had a decent number of catches. Never had any touchdowns whatsoever because he was in our offense.
Carolina never scored. So
I felt like when he moved, for the sake of time, I'm gonna move past that dig. So whenever he went to Chicago, I knew we were losing a great wide receiver.
By the way, we're talking about DJ Moore in case you just have no idea who we're talking about.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't ever say his name. So when he went to Chicago, I thought that it would be a similar situation to where he might score a few more touchdowns, but I thought the yardage and the receptions might actually come down because of my lack of faith in Justin Fields. And so I had him fairly lower than most people in last year's rankings, but but most people didn't have him very high. I think he was ADPing in the 7th or 8th round last year. So what I have come to the conclusion on is DJ Moore is just a really damn good wide receiver. And even though Justin Fields isn't that great of a quarterback, and Justin Fields really didn't do anything else other than get the ball to DJ Moore is going to help whoever's. If they have a sliver of talent, he's going to get the ball to them.
I do have to say, I watched Justin Fields make some pretty impressive passes to DJ Moore in the end zone. I don't know if that's Justin Fields or if just because DJ Moore was open. Well, you know what I mean?
Well, let's not be too hard on Fields. We bashed on him all last year, and he lost. We were right in the fact that Justin Fields lost dynasty value. Mm-hmm. He is not worth nearly as much right now as he was last year. I'd say it's a late first less than he was last year.
Especially with the looming of
with
the possibility of him not being the Bears next year.
Which we also predicted
yes.
that it would be an issue. Mm-hmm. Is it going to happen? We don't know. But his value is being affected by that, and it should be. So I guess what I was going to say is, to be fair to Justin Fields, I do think he had at least some small bit of progression in the passing game.
I agree.
I do.
But that's what I was trying to say. Was that Justin Fields? Or was it because he had DJ Moore as well?
It was probably more DJ Moore, but just the eye test on Justin Fields, to me, he looked like a better thrower of the football this past year than he did the year before. Yeah. Now, I'm not saying it was any kind of great strides in my opinion, but I did think he had at least a minimal amount of improvement in that area. So that gives me enough faith going forward that DJ Moore is going to be able to have some decent numbers like he did this year. Now, he was wide receiver 8 this year. Far exceeded my expectations. I don't know if he can keep that up, but there's nothing that says he can't, especially if they take Caleb Williams. Caleb Williams is as good as everybody seems to think he is. Right now, he's being valued as the wide receiver 20 around that area.
I'd snap that.
He's going in the early 5th round, and I'm thinking that might be too late for this guy.
That's what I'm saying. I'd snap it. If he's there and I've got a draft pick there, I'm probably going to snap that.
I said I wasn't going to do this because this was more supposed to be a recap, but we've got a few minutes before we hit that hour mark, or we're right on it. So real quickly, I'm going to go look at some guys that are being valued similarly or even below DJ Moore right now. You tell me, DJ Moore or this guy, Nico Collins.
Nico Collins.
I think it's DJ Moore for me, just because he doesn't have. He's not going to have to share those touches with Tank Dell, right? For me, DK Metcalf.
DJ Moore.
I think it's DJ Moore as well. T. Higgins.
Right now, it's DJ Moore just because I don't know where T. Higgins is going.
100% agreed. Once we get some certainty with T. Higgins, maybe I'll change my mind. Here's a good one, Tank Dell.
I said Nico Collins, so I'm going to say Tank Dell as well.
See, I'm the opposite. I actually think Tank is more of the star of that team besides Nico.
I think those two guys are going to be the new Mike Evans and Chris Godwin.
Could be.
I think both of them could very well finish as top 10 wide receivers.
I think I'd take Tank right now over DJ Moore. Debo Samuel, I think
it's clear.
That's an easy DJ Moore. So we might be getting Drake London. I think that's kind of easy DJ Moore in my opinion.
Yeah. If they go out and are able to trade up for a Jaden Daniels or even going to the number 1 overall pick and taking Caleb Williams, then I think it very easily could be Drake London. But all these possibilities, I'd rather have DJ Moore.
Yeah. Well, Luigi, is there anything else you want to comment on before we get out of here?
I think that's it.
All right, guys, this has been episode 17 of the Dynasty Dreamerz podcast. Who knows when we'll see you again.
Hopefully soon.
If you've stuck in and listened to this whole thing, we greatly appreciate it. I hope the audio experience wasn't too bad.
We're trying something new.
Yeah. So we will catch you next time. And for my co-host, Luigi Federico, this is Joe Galloway signing out.